There's a man who had everything taken from him, his home, his family, his name. The Nazis gave him a number instead. And yet the guards were afraid of him, not because of what he did, because of what he didn't do. He didn't react. And that single quality made him the most powerful person in that camp. That man was Viktor Frankl. And what he figured out inside those walls is something most free people living comfortable lives will spend their entire existence never learning. What you're about to hear is not self-help. Self-help tells you to feel better about yourself. This is something completely different. This is about what actually happens inside the human brain when someone stops being readable, and what that does to every single person around them permanently. There are 7 specific things that psychologically powerful people never do, not because they read it somewhere, because at some point, something happened that forced them to learn it. And once they learned it, they could never go back to operating the way everyone else does. By the time this video is over, you won't be able to either. But before we get into the first one, I need to tell you about a psychological experiment that changed how researchers think about social dominance. The result was so unexpected that the lead researcher asked his team to run it 3 more times because he didn't believe what he was seeing. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it. Because what they found explains something about human behavior that will completely reframe every social interaction you've had in the last 10 years. Let's start here. Every single person you've ever admired for their calm, their presence, their ability to walk into a room and immediately shift the energy without raising their voice or making a single dramatic move. Every one of those people has something in common. Not confidence, not intelligence, not charisma, something far more specific. They stopped leaking. And here's what that means. Your nervous system is constantly broadcasting. Not with words, with micro-expressions, reaction timing, the speed your eyes move when something bothers you, the slight change in your breathing when you feel threatened, that 0.3 second pause before you respond when you're not sure what to say. All of that is data, and every person you interact with is reading it. Not consciously, not deliberately, but the human brain is a threat detection machine that has been running social pattern recognition for 200,000 years. It doesn't need to be told to analyze you, it does it automatically. When you react, when you rush to defend yourself, when you jump to explain your decisions to someone who didn't even ask, you are flooding the room with information about exactly where your soft spots are, what scares you, what matters to you enough to make you move. And the moment someone has that map, they don't even need to use it intentionally. The dynamic shifts. You can feel it shift. That subtle sense that the conversation isn't going the way you wanted, that you're somehow losing ground without knowing exactly where the ground went. That feeling has a precise psychological name and a precise psychological cause. Researchers who study influence and social power call it emotional reactivity as a liability, and the research is blunt. The more predictably reactive you are, the more social leverage others have over you, whether they're trying to use it or not. It's not that they're calculating it, it's that the human brain automatically increases its confidence around less reactive opponents and decreases it around more reactive ones. You have been in rooms where someone walks in and the temperature changes, not because of anything they said or did, just their presence carries a kind of weight that reorganizes the room around them. You've also been in rooms where someone walks in and within seconds you can tell they're nervous, without them saying a single word. The difference between those two people is not what they know, it's what they show. Here's the second thing, and this one is going to hit closer to home than you expect. The urge to explain yourself is not a character trait, it is a fear response. And it was installed in you so early and reinforced so consistently that by now it feels like just who you are. It isn't. Here's where it actually comes from. In early childhood, most of us grew up in environments where our worth was at least partially conditional. Not necessarily dramatically, not necessarily abusively, but most children learn very quickly that when they disappoint someone important, they need to fix it. That the way to restore safety is to explain, to justify, to make the other person understand why you did what you did, so they can go back to approving of you. That is an extraordinarily useful skill for a 7-year-old navigating a parent's emotions. It is a catastrophic liability for a 34-year-old navigating a boardroom. Because when you over-explain to an adult who hasn't asked for your reasoning, you're not being transparent. You're communicating something else entirely. You're communicating that their opinion of you is load-bearing, that if they don't understand and accept your reasoning, something important to you is at risk. And people, even good people, even people who love you, will unconsciously use that leverage. Not because they're manipulative, because social leverage is instinctive. Think about the last time you defended a decision to someone who hadn't attacked it. Think about the last time you pre-apologized before stating an opinion. Think about the last time you softened something true because you were afraid of how the room would receive it. That pattern is costing you something that can't be measured in a single conversation. It accumulates. And over time, it quietly restructures how everyone around you relates to your authority. The people who stopped doing that didn't become cold. They didn't become rude. They became something far more interesting, someone whose words carry weight precisely because they don't use extra words to prop them up. Now, I told you we'd come back to that experiment. Here it is. Researchers at Stanford set up a study on what they called social gravity, the unconscious way humans orient themselves around certain people in group settings. They put groups of 8 strangers in a room, gave them a collaborative task, and filmed everything. No designated leader, no titles, no one told anyone what to do. What they expected was that the most vocal people, the ones with the most energy and the most ideas, would naturally take on leadership roles. That is not what happened. The people who ended up with the highest social gravity in the room, the ones everyone else subtly oriented toward, made more eye contact with, deferred to without being asked, were consistently the ones who spoke least and reacted least. Not the quietest in personality, but the ones whose responses were the most measured, the most deliberate, the most unhurried. The room bent toward stillness, not toward noise. They ran the study 4 times with different groups. Same result every time. The brain reads stillness as authority, not because stillness performs authority, but because authority at its biological root is the absence of a visible threat response. And a person without a visible threat response reads to the ancient brain as someone who has nothing to fear. Now here's where it gets deeper, and this is the third thing. Most of the reactions that are controlling your life right now are not responding to what's actually happening. They're responding to what happened before. A version of this situation that ended badly once, maybe years ago, maybe in a context that has absolutely nothing to do with your life right now. Neuroscientists call this predictive processing. Your brain doesn't wait for reality to fully unfold and then respond. It makes a prediction based on every similar past experience stored in memory and triggers the emotional response to that prediction before the reality has even finished happening. Someone sends you a short text with no punctuation and your chest tightens before you've formed a single thought. A silence in a conversation goes 2 seconds too long and your brain has already written 3 catastrophic interpretations of what that silence means. Someone looks at you a certain way in a meeting and by the time you're driving home, you've reconstructed their expression into evidence of something. But here's the thing, your brain chose that interpretation from a menu. It always does. And the menu it chooses from is built from your most emotionally charged memories, not your most accurate ones, not your most recent ones, your most charged ones, the ones that hurt the most, the ones that made you feel the most unsafe. This means your emotional reality is, in a very literal neurological sense, based on a story your brain is writing in real time using old data and then presenting to you as objective truth. The gap between that story and what's actually happening is where your freedom lives. The fourth thing is one almost nobody talks about because it sounds uncomfortable in a culture that constantly tells you to express yourself, share yourself, be yourself loudly and visibly. Your attention is not neutral. It is a signal of value. And right now, you are almost certainly distributing it in ways that are quietly undermining your position. Here's the mechanism. The human brain assigns importance based on what other brains treat as important. This is called social proof of relevance. When you respond to something immediately, when you drop everything to react, when you let something visibly affect you, you have just told every brain in the room, including your own, that this thing matters, that this person has power, that their words carry enough weight to move you. When you don't respond, when you are genuinely unmoved, or when you choose the timing of your response rather than letting the other person choose it for you, the dynamic reverses. You have communicated without a single word that what just happened did not rise to the level of requiring your full attention. And that communication is more powerful than anything you could say in response. There's a reason the people who are hardest to manipulate are never the ones who argue back the most aggressively. The aggressive response is still a response. It still tells the other person they got in. The hardest people to manipulate are the ones who seem to receive the attempt with the same mild, almost bored acknowledgement they'd give to weather. Oh, it's raining, noted, moving on. Now I want you to think about someone in your life right now, and I know this is going to land for someone watching this. Someone whose behavior consistently bothers you. Someone whose opinion you give far too much mental real estate to. Someone whose texts you check more often than you want to admit. Someone whose approval you've been quietly chasing for longer than you'd like to acknowledge. That dynamic exists not because of who they are. It exists because of the signal you've been sending them continuously about how much they matter. Every reaction is a deposit into their account. Every explanation is an investment in their opinion. Every time you adjusted your behavior to manage their feelings, you reinforce the architecture of that dynamic. And that architecture can be dismantled, not through a confrontation, not through a dramatic speech, through the quiet, consistent withdrawal of reactions that were never serving you. The fifth thing is the deepest cut. The people in your immediate environment are quietly setting a ceiling on who you become, not through what they say to you, through what they model as normal. Human beings are the most sophisticated social mimics that have ever existed. We don't copy people deliberately. We absorb them. Their vocabulary seeps into yours. Their way of interpreting setbacks starts to feel like common sense. Their comfort with mediocrity, if that's what's present, begins to feel like wisdom. Like maybe your ambition was naive. Maybe you were being unrealistic. Maybe this is just how life works. It's not dramatic. It's atmospheric, like pressure. You don't feel it. It's just always there, shaping everything. Social psychologists have studied this for decades. The conclusion is always the same. The single greatest predictor of long-term trajectory, not talent, not circumstances, not opportunity, is the habitual social environment, the room you're in most often, the conversations you have most consistently, the emotional baseline of the people you return to at the end of every day. So here's the question you need to ask yourself honestly. If you adopted the exact beliefs, habits, emotional patterns, and level of ambition of the 5 people you spend the most time with right now, where would you end up? If their ceiling became your ceiling, what would your life look like in 5 years? If that question doesn't produce a clean, confident answer, you already know what needs to change. The sixth thing is going to seem like it contradicts everything I've said so far until the moment it doesn't. The most socially powerful thing you can do in the right moment with the right person is show them something real. Not everything, not constantly, not as a habit of emotional bleeding, but strategically, deliberately, selectively, show one real crack, admit one real uncertainty, share one thing that cost you something to say. Here's the neuroscience. When the human brain encounters someone who seems completely polished, completely unreadable, completely without apparent flaw, it raises its defenses. Because something that seems too controlled, too seamless, reads to the threat detection system as performance, and performance means unknown intent. An unknown intent means possible danger. But the moment someone reveals something genuine, a moment of doubt, a past failure they didn't need to mention, an honest admission in a room where they could have stayed hidden, something happens neurologically in the person watching. Oxytocin releases, the guard drops, and in the gap left by that dropped guard, trust floods in almost instantaneously. The technique is precise. You choose the moment, you choose the audience, you choose the vulnerability that reveals strength, not weakness. The kind that says, I know this about myself. I've looked at it clearly, and I'm not afraid for you to know it too. That signal creates loyalty. It creates the kind of connection that makes people genuinely want to see you win. And now the seventh thing, the one I've been building toward this entire time, the one that holds all of it together. Because without this, none of the others will stick. You can practice every single one of these principles perfectly and still feel like something is missing, because something will be. Most people's sense of self is borrowed. It was assembled from other people's opinions, other people's standards, other people's definitions of what success and failure and worthiness look like. The family that told you what a good person looks like. The culture that told you what a successful person earns. The social environment that told you what an attractive, respected, valuable human being is supposed to be and do and have. And you took all of that in because you had no choice. You were a child, you were forming, you needed a map, and you built an identity on top of it. And that identity has been running your life ever since, mostly below your conscious awareness, mostly without your permission. Here's the problem with a borrowed identity. It has no roots. When someone criticizes you, it wobbles because it was never truly yours to begin with. When circumstances change, when the job ends, when the relationship ends, when the external validation dries up, it collapses. Because it was never a foundation, it was scaffolding. And scaffolding only holds as long as someone else keeps building on top of it. The people who are genuinely unshakable, while not performing stability, actually living it, have done something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. They've gone underneath all of that borrowed material and asked the brutal, unglamorous, deeply uncomfortable question, who am I when there's no one watching? What do I actually believe when I'm not performing for an audience? What would I protect even if protecting it cost me everything comfortable and familiar? Those answers, when they're real, not aspirational, not what you wish were true, but what is actually verifiably true in the moments when you have nothing to perform for, become something that cannot be shaken, because this time you didn't inherit them. You found them, you tested them, you chose them. And when your identity is chosen rather than inherited, something changes in the way you move through the world. Psychologists call it coherence. The alignment between what a person believes and how they behave, regardless of who's watching or what's at stake. When that coherence is present, people trust you before they can explain why. They're drawn to you before they've made a conscious decision, because the nervous system recognizes something in you that has become extraordinarily rare. You are the same person in every room, not performing, not adjusting, not reading the audience and calculating what version of yourself they want. Just present, just real, just completely and unwaveringly you. Go back to Viktor Frankl, everything stripped away. And yet the guards were afraid of him, not because of his fists, not because of his words, because of the one thing they could not take. He had already decided who he was. And that decision, made in the worst conditions any human being can face, held. Not because he was exceptional, because he had done the work that made the decision real, because his identity had roots that couldn't be pulled out by circumstance, by cruelty, by loss, by anything the external world could manufacture. That same capacity is available to you right now, not as a destination, not as a level you reach after enough self-improvement content, as a decision made once and then made again tomorrow, and then the day after that. Every time you pause before reacting, you are building something permanent. Every time you protect your attention from what doesn't deserve it, you are building something permanent. Every time you hold your ground without raising your voice, speak without needing the room's approval, let the silence work instead of filling it with noise, you are building something that cannot be taken from you, because this time you built it. And if you want to understand what happens to a person once they've truly built that foundation, what changes in their relationships, their decisions, their entire way of operating, that's exactly what the next video is about.